Kia ora and welcome to Muffin Talk. Muffin Talk is a weekly radio program to which I invite guests to talk about their work and their passion for issues on social justice, Bible studies, interfaith or community programs. Today I've invited Stephen Moe to a Zoom recording for broadcast. Stephen, a warm welcome and hi to our radio program.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you for having me. Really looking forward to this.
Stephen Moe grew up in Christchurch and graduated from Canterbury University. He's a barrister holding a practicing certificate for New Zealand, but is also qualified in England and Wales and New South Wales. Stephen helps set up startups and investors in tech companies, charities, and purpose-driven businesses. He has a special focus on empowering impact and often helps clients to get their legal structures right. Stephen, you are a lawyer and barrister who has a focus on charities. How did you get interested in charities?
Well, I kept meeting amazing people doing good in our world, and I realized that many of them were acting from motives of the heart and doing things in a for-purpose way, not for a profit way. So I thought, actually, this is a really interesting sector to support, and I would love to do more, learn more. And so when I came back to New Zealand 7 years ago, that was really kind of the focus of what my practice is really helping for-purpose organizations and getting them set up legally right so that they're then empowered with a correct foundation to do some good in the world.
That sounds great. And this foundation, I think it's really needed. And you just mentioned already the expression for purpose. We'll come to that in a minute. So when I read some statistics about the charities, there were in 2019, 2020, in the annual report of the Charities Services, there have been 27,800 charities in Aotearoa, New Zealand. While this number might have declined due to the impact of COVID, it's still a very large number for a country with a small population. What is so special about charities?
Well, I think that for maybe the opening point is that actually per capita, we have one of the highest number of charities per person in the world. So if you look at comparable countries like Canada or Australia or the UK or, Commonwealth type countries, they don't have as many per person as we do. To me, that's a signal of the generosity of Kiwis, that they actually want to start something that will help others. So I view it as a positive thing. Some people view it as a negative thing in that there's too many charities, but I view it as a really positive thing that people want to do good in the world, and they do that through setting up a charity. In the last year, we've helped set up about 40 or 50 charities, so we've done quite a lot of them. So that's almost one a week. But if you think about it, when I'm talking with people, I always say, is there another charity that's already doing what you do? Because we don't want to have replication. So I always try to encourage people to get in behind and support an existing charity before you set up your brand new charity, because we don't want to have the same charity competing for the same trustees, the same funding, and doing basically the same thing.
Have you, in that context, have you also helped charities to merge? So when they are when two charities are struggling with a similar target group, would you help them to merge?
Yeah, we do that as well. Yep, or amalgamate, so become one. It depends on the context. Sometimes charities, the best charities realize that they're there to fulfill a mission and a purpose, and the legal structure and their name and all those things are secondary to achieving the mission and purpose. And if you're clear about that, then it might be the best alternative to actually stop what you're doing and transfer your assets to another charity. So we've helped multiple charities do this. And I think it takes a special wisdom of trustees and people to be able to say, actually, there's another charity that could do this better. And we're going to stop and we're going to transfer and give you our property, give you our money so that you can continue on with the great work. So yeah, I do see that from time to time. Unfortunately, sometimes people get too enamored with their charity itself, and they think they have to perpetuate it, because to not do so would be a betrayal of the original founders. And if that happens, they're putting the entity ahead of the mission and the purpose. So it's a shame when that happens, but sometimes it does. And unfortunately, even in religious groups, sometimes you look and you see, this as an example, a church in 1962, it had 300 members. Today, there's 8 people left. Really, it would be probably the best use of that property and the funds to say, we'd like to support someone else doing work in the community, and we're going to wind up and allow others to continue good work.
I think that's a really good point, because also some tasks that charities would have, the government might have taken over, so there might not be that need anymore, or as you say, or another charity. So it's good to revise every now and then the purpose and look at the purpose.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I think many charities are set up, say, in 1971 or 1997 or 2012, and then nobody looks at their trust deed or their founding documents again. And oftentimes they stray far away from their original purposes because they're seeking funding. So they were set up to help preschool children, but then a contract came up to help high school children, and then a contract came up to help university students, and then a suicide prevention contract came up, and all of a sudden you're not even within the umbrella of your original purposes. So these are important things to do, is to refresh your documents from time to time.
Absolutely. And you were just talking about purposes, and because charities are often called not for profit in English. And I was comparing it from Spanish. You have Organización Benéfica, and in German, the term is gemeinnützige Organisation. And gemeinnützige Organisation, that means organization that benefits the community. Now, I understand that you're suggesting to rename not for profit, and in the English-speaking world. Can you tell us more about your ideas?
Yeah, no problem. I wrote an article about this because I felt it was important enough to warrant spending a bit of time on. So I can share that with you and with the listeners. But basically, I feel like if we describe the sector as not for profit, then we're starting with a negative word, not. Why do we define ourselves by what we're not? And then it's in relation to for profit, as if profit was the thing that was this high level, like for profit is the best thing, and we are not for profit. So I feel like it's a negative framing, and I feel like words are important. And if we're talking about the not-for-profit sector, we are categorizing it as a certain type of thing in relation to profit, as if profit was the thing that we should aim for. So that's a very Milton Friedman-esque concept, which he wrote an essay in the 1970s saying shareholder primacy is the most important thing when it comes to company. In other words, profit is key. But what I think would be a better phrase would be for purpose, because that really gets at the heart of what these organizations are set up to do. It's not that they are not for profit, it's that they are for purpose. And if you think about it in that way, it's a very positive framing. What are we here for? We are here for purpose. What is the purpose? Well, it's likely to be education, religion, reduction of poverty, purposes beneficial to the community. Those are the 4 charitable heads. But I think the framing of it as we are here for purpose is a really helpful way to conceive of things. So that's why I'm advocating for it.
You're advocating for purpose.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think that if the title changes, then also the volunteers feel differently, because many volunteers do exactly what somebody else in a business that is solely for profit would do, but they are not getting paid, and it's still work.
Mm. Yeah, that's right. And I think it kind of puts at the center the fact that these organizations are really have something important at their core. So it's a for-purpose organization. It's there to, and quite often people these days are talking about people, planet, purpose. You know, I think we're kind of realizing that profit as an underlying driver has probably led us down a path which is not a very helpful path. And we should actually be focusing on these other P's of what is our purpose? How are we treating the people? How are we treating the planet? So I think it aligns really well with that kind of conception.
I like these three P's. And
That's right.
so, and you recently wrote a book about social enterprises in New Zealand. And social enterprises is often, the expression is not often understood, but can you give a little bit of a background? What is the difference between charities and social enterprises?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Social Enterprises in New Zealand, a legal handbook. That's the book that I wrote. And then I followed it up with this book, which came out last year, Laying Foundations for Reimagining Business. So those are both free downloads. I'm just giving it away because I want the ideas to spread rather than to make a profit. um, and so I think when you come to the word social enterprise, I I wrote a book about it, but I'm not using that term as much. The reason is that in New Zealand, it's just a label, and it's a label which is basically being used to describe a certain attitude towards business. And that attitude says we want our business to be sustainable, i.e., we want profits because we want to continue it, but we also want to achieve a purpose through our business. So rather than focusing just on how much money can we make, it's also about achieving a societal good. And so an example would be, I'm going to set up a cafe. Okay, that's great. So you're going to get a bank loan and you're going to make some money from it. What if I told you I'm going to set up a cafe and all the employees will have a disability of some kind? Well, all of a sudden it changes the framing of the cafe because I'm not just there to sell more coffee. I'm there to provide employment for people who might not have had the opportunity otherwise. So that's just a little example, but it shows the power of a business which is aligned with its purpose. And so I'm using the term social enterprise less because I'm worried that people will start thinking, oh, that's what those businesses do. Like those people over there are social enterprises. And actually, that concept that every business should have purpose at the heart of it is something that all businesses should have applying to them. So I don't want to just have 500 or 1,000 amazing social enterprises in New Zealand. I want there to be 600,000, 700,000 businesses which have purpose at the core of what they do. And so I think the word social enterprise could potentially mean people are turned off by the concepts, and we want the concepts to apply more broadly. Also, social has certain connotations. So does social enterprise, is that covering environmental good? Is it covering cultural? Is it covering other impacts that might not be, quote marks, social? So for those reasons, I think using the word impact enterprise or impact company is a easier and simpler word to use. So that's what I'm advocating for these days.
That's really good, because I also think that when you have the social enterprise, or this, like what you said with the cafe, it gives dignity to the people who are working there. You're not going there to give alms, and it is a different approach, and shows solidarity in for everybody. And tell me, when we think that you say that every business could be transformed into a social enterprise, is that possible?
I would love to think that every business already has this on their radar. They just haven't articulated it or thought about it this way. And what I mean by that is when you're starting a business, most entrepreneurs are doing it for reasons of more than just making money. Like some of them are just hard out capitalist. I'm going to make widgets and I'm going to make them of unsustainable sources. And I'm just going to sell as much as I can and make as much money as I can. But most people, when you talk to them, they're actually there because they want to provide employment for people. They want to produce whatever it is, a service or a good that is benefiting the rest of the population. So I think actually we could encourage people. What I encourage people to think about is, if you want to be a social enterprise or an impact company, I think there's two things you should do. The first one is you should write down what is your purpose. So charities, as we were talking about before, you must say what your purpose is. You have to articulate it to become registered as a charity. We have no such requirement for companies. For a company, all you need to do is have a director, a shareholder, and a name. You don't have to have a constitution. You don't have to say what your purpose is. And I think we're missing something there. I think if we did require companies to say what their purpose is, it would help to focus the entrepreneurs, and it would force them to be clear about why they're here in the world. The second thing is, I think that companies should be required to report on their purposes and on the impact they're having in the world. So more than just how much money did we make, also how many people did we touch? What services did we provide? What thing did we produce that made the world a better place? I think those are the two things. Number one, articulate your mission. Number two, report on your mission. That would change the face of companies and businesses for sure.
And many companies, they have mission and have a mission and a vision for marketing reasons. And the mission and vision would be normally formulated in figures, for example. But that does make them a social enterprise.
No, I think it has to be really authentic and really baked into the heart of what the company is. So I'm talking about more than just a vision statement or a branding exercise. And you tend towards greenwashing if you're only doing it to sell more stuff. So what I'm talking about is having that impact statement in your constitution so that you're accountable for it, and you have to report on it, and you tell people about what it is that you believe in and what you're there for. And I think that's quite different to saying, hey, come and buy our green, sustainable drink. Like that's quite different to saying we exist to source quality products that then makes nutritious, amazing drinks that people can enjoy and build community through that. Like that's quite different to saying, come buy our product. I just wrote an article for the spinoff about the concept of greenwashing, because ASIC in Australia has called up a superannuation fund that was promoting a sustainability fund, but actually it was investing in coal mining, gambling, and alcohol. And so that was an example of greenwashing. In other words, come buy our amazing sustainability product, but actually we've invested in these other things. So it's a real danger.
I think the transparency is really important. That leads me also to the question about governance and transparency, because when we talk about charities and charitable trusts and societies, in corporate societies, there are differences in governance, aren't there?
There are differences, but there's also principles which apply across all of them. So I recently did a podcast for the Institute of Directors called Board Matters. So people can check that out. It's 13 interviews with very experienced directors. And the principles apply whatever organization you're from. And that essentially is acting in the best interest of the organization. So that's important because you always have to take off your hat of, I'm interested in this in a personal way, and say, yeah, but what's advancing the charitable purposes, or what's in the best interest of the company? And so those are governance principles that apply no matter what. The other principle from governance is that too often we're looking into the past and we're saying, what happened at our last event? How many people came? What was the reach of our email newsletter? We're looking in the past. What we should be doing in governance is looking to the future and having strategy to say, in 5 years, here's what we're going to be facing. So let's make changes today so that we are ready. That's true governance.
But you would also have to analyze the past to see for the future, so that this is what we've done so far, and in this context, the context is changing, and so we will have to change.
That's right. And you have to be able to look at the past to anticipate where the future's coming. But my challenge for your listeners and everyone involved is, are we spending 75% of our meetings looking at the past and 25% on the future? Or are we spending 25% on the past and 75% on the future? Because I think we should be spending a lot more time looking to the future compared to the past.
That's an important point. Another question that I have is about, you are recommending people what to do, or you're helping charities or people who are organizing, starting an initiative, an organization. What would you recommend to somebody who's interested in establishing an initiative or organization, but doesn't know which legal form or of entity to choose?
Well, I've written some materials on this. So we have one called Charities in New Zealand, which is a legal handbook. And then we have the social enterprises one. And then we have a startups legal toolkit. It's all for free. I'm a partner at a law firm called Perryfield. So the website is perryfield.com. And my name's very unusual. So you can just send me a message and I'm happy to have 15-minute conversations with people at no cost. So that's something I do because I have a commute. I might as well use my time efficiently and help people rather than just listening to the radio. So there are good resources out there. I guess the thing you always should be doing is beginning with the end in mind. So where do you want to be in 5 or 10 years? And that will then help you decide which foundation are you going to build. Is it really a charitable entity? Is it a company? Is it an incorporated society? Knowing what the shape will look like in the future will help you decide today. But then also, I'd be encouraging you to say, where is the money going to come from? So every venture needs some funding. Is it going to come from a donation? Well, probably a charitable structure is going to be better. Is it going to come from an investment? Well, probably a company is going to be better. So it's not that difficult. You just have to ask yourself, how is this going to be funded? And then how are we going to keep our purpose and mission at the core of what we do?
If we look at the two entities, in corporate society and charitable trust, what are the main differences of the two?
Yeah, the main thing is that incorporated societies are more democratic, so they're very member driven. So the members make decisions, the members appoint officers, whereas a charitable trust is more autocratic, which is there's trustees and they make decisions. Personally, I prefer charitable trusts because they are simple and clean and there's less messiness that comes from democracy. It sounds like I'm speaking against democracy, but it's purely the fact that if you have elections, it gets political and people get hurt. And sometimes there's takeovers that happen. So let's say you have an incorporated society with $1 million in the bank. It's doing amazing work. The day before the AGM, there's a rush of new members. They come in and they vote in a brand new executive. That's fine. It's legal, but it's suddenly taking the organization in a new direction. So they aren't as stable from my perspective as charitable trusts, which, you have your mission and your purpose, you have trustees, and you get on with achieving what you want. And the other bit is that charitable trusts can have democracy and membership built into what they do as well. You can have membership. So many church groups would have members of their church, and those would be recognized in a charitable trust.
So these are really important points to consider. And also, you might have in corporate society at the moment, but after hearing what Steve just said, I think that some organizations might rethink and say, maybe we should become a charitable trust while we're all getting along very well, and to protect our organization. Do you think that, especially when you have assets, you were talking about a lot of money. Most charities that I know don't have so much money, but if you have a lot of money, then charitable trust would be the right way, possibly?
It might be. Yeah, every context is different. People want me to be able to say this is the perfect template for every situation, but the reality is that it's going to depend on the circumstances. It's going to depend on the stakeholders, who's involved, where the money's coming from, what the money's being used for, who are the interested groups, who are the beneficiaries. So it's really hard to make a blanket statement that, this is the only way.
Yeah.
The other thing I should say is all incorporated societies, and there's 24,000 of them, they all must re-register within the next 2.5 years. So this is a perfect moment to look in the mirror and say, should we stay as an incorporated society or should we switch to become a charitable trust? And I've written a guide for incorporated societies, and we have an information hub, which has more than 100 frequently asked questions and many, many videos about the things that they should know.
Oh, great. So thank you so much for these resources. And we put the links on my website so that people can go to the links and get more information. Thank you. Thank you very much, Stephen. It has been really informative. And I think that it's what I get out of it is just review every now and then what your paperwork is, what your constitution is, what your rules are or your deed. And so that you know that you're still in the right corner, the right area. And especially when you're looking for funding, you might have to rewrite your constitution and include something else in order to seek funding from a certain funder.
Yeah, and exactly. And also, if people are thinking there's not resources, there actually are. There's a lot of good material. So feel free. My name is Unusual. Feel free to look me up and send me a message. And I also do a podcast called Seeds. If you want to hear from inspiring people, I've done 345 interviews of amazing people who've started new things. So it might be inspiring for some of your listeners as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I will put the link up on the website. And I think it is something really wonderful, especially in a world where things are changing, to think of your purpose and think of what can we do to contribute to a better society and a better world. Thank you, Stephen.
You're welcome.
And
Thank you for all that you do.
thank you. And to our listeners, our next sessions for Titipounamu Study and Joy is our 4 consecutive sessions with the topic Focus on Target, Draw Fresh Momentum with Letitia Putembadat. And this is on 4 Tuesdays starting on the 27th of June, 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. These are sessions for you to stop and reflect on where we are heading. I think that fits very well to our interview today. The sessions are positive and interactive, and each session lends itself to the next one. So this is something that you could do in your lunch break and have a look at the website to find out more information about it. So thank you very much, Stephen, and kia kaha, keep safe, and have a good Friday.